The iron clink of handcuffs echoed off marble walls as cameras flashed like lightning in a storm. A billionaire, mid-40s, sharp suit torn at the collar, stood still, his eyes not on the press, but on a little girl, no older than 7, standing barefoot in the rain at the courthouse steps. Her sundress clung to her frame, soaked and trembling. She said nothing. He said nothing. Their silence screamed louder than the chaos. Across the street, his face loomed large on a digital billboard, Forbes Man of the Year, now reduced to a headline. CEO arrested in shocking turn of events. A reporter shoved a mic forward. "Is this your daughter?" But no one answered. The girl stepped forward. The man's breath caught. His knees buckled. Somewhere behind the sirens and shouts, a whisper cracked the air. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. No one knew her name. No one knew his truth. Yet, at that moment, the coldest man in the city melted in full view of the world. And the world gasped. 20 minutes earlier, the glass tower pulsed with silence. From the 92nd floor, the city stretched like a map beneath. The CEO stood alone in his office, jacket draped over a leather chair, sleeves rolled up, fingers trembling slightly as he held a crumpled letter. His empire, worth billions, couldn't shield him from the 7 words scrawled in shaky handwriting. "You left me. I found my way." The storm outside mirrored his thoughts, loud, unpredictable, ready to break. He stared out, raindrops racing down the glass. "Security," he muttered, voice cracking. "Did anyone leave something at reception?" No answer came. Just static. On the desk lay a forgotten photo. Him, a woman, and a toddler. Time had blurred their faces. He didn't remember how to feel. Not until the thunder cracked and the elevator light blinked red. The elevator door opened. A security guard's voice, panicked, low, buzzed through the intercom. "Sir, there's a child. Alone." The CEO froze. The letter slipped from his fingers. He moved slowly, as if wading through memory. The hallway outside seemed longer than it had ever been. Fluorescent lights flickered. His shoes echoed against the marble. When he reached the reception floor, there she stood, silent, drenched, too small for the massive lobby. She held nothing, said nothing, just looked up at him with recognition. His chest tightened. Who brought you here?" he asked. No reply. His voice shook. "What's your name?" Still silence. But her eyes, they weren't strangers. Somewhere deep, something shattered. She moved closer. The CEO stepped back instinctively, then cursed himself for it. The girl reached into her small coat pocket and pulled out a plastic locket. Inside, faded photos. One of him. One of her. A third one, torn. His breath stilled. "Who gave you this?" he whispered. Her lips parted. One word. "Mommy." 1,000 memories erupted. Her face, her laugh, her plea the night she left. "You'll regret this," she had said. "One day, you'll look into her eyes and see yourself." Now here he stood, watching that prophecy unfold like thunder across his ribs. The locket swung between them, refracting the lightning that cracked across the glass lobby. He knelt, no longer the CEO of anything. Just a man staring at a stranger who wasn't a stranger. She stepped forward, touched his forehead gently. "You look tired," she whispered. It wasn't a question. His hands trembled as he reached for her, but stopped short. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I didn't know where you were." She looked at him with quiet wisdom beyond her years. "I did." Lightning flashed again, and behind them, the glass doors burst open as police rushed in, sirens wailing. She didn't flinch. He stood, shielding her for the first time, choosing her over everything. His empire could wait. His heart couldn't. Before the suits, the skyscrapers, and the headlines, there was a boy. 8 years old, forgotten in a Detroit corner store, legs swinging off a cracked plastic chair, while his mother begged the manager for work. "Anything," she'd pleaded, voice raw, hands trembling. He remembered the hum of the fridge beside him, the way he had tried to appear invisible. That day she came out without a job, eyes red. She knelt before him and said, "We don't cry, we rise." That phrase lodged in his ribs, shaping steel where softness had once lived. He vowed never to be left again, never to need, never to feel small. The world would remember his name, but he had to forget hers first. That was the cost, and he paid it gladly. Until now. She once brought him warmth. Before ambition iced his veins, he had known softness in her. They met in college, both burning with dreams. She wore combat boots and carried books like weapons. He wore second-hand suits and calculated everything. "You build," she'd said, "and I'll remind you why." For years they were unstoppable. She gave him laughter, he gave her vision. But somewhere between Series A and private jets, he stopped coming home. Their daughter was born on a day he missed 3 meetings, and he never forgave her for it. Or himself. Eventually, silence replaced vows. She left with a suitcase and a promise. "Shall find you when you're ready to remember." He didn't believe it then. But tonight, her words stood in the lobby like a ghost returned. The girl sat curled on the CEO's office couch now, a blanket over her shoulders, her eyes scanning the high-rise windows. "Do you live here?" she asked. He paused, unsure how to answer. "Sometimes," he replied. "Why?" Her head tilted. "It feels lonely." That word cracked something again. He'd never called it that. Strategic. Efficient. Productive. But never lonely. She pointed to the portrait on the shelf, an old photo of him and her mother, half hidden in shadows. "You smiled in that one," she whispered. He stared. He didn't remember the photo, or the smile. But she did. That night, the silence between them spoke of years lost, not in rage, but in retreat. She wouldn't sleep unless the light stayed on. "Darkness makes me forget," she said, voice small. He left the hallway, light glowing, door slightly ajar. As she closed her eyes, he sat just beyond, back against the wall, staring into nothing. His phone buzzed, board meeting rescheduled, merger falling apart, PR disaster looming. He silenced it all. For the first time, business waited. He remembered the nights he used to wait by his own mother's door, listening for the click of her returning key. That click never came on time. He promised he'd never make someone wait like that. And yet, here she was, sleeping in a stranger's room, with the hallway light as her shield. He watched the soft rise and fall of her chest and finally whispered, "You're safe now." Morning arrived with muted sun pouring into the penthouse. The girl stood at the window, watching clouds drift like thoughts unspoken. "Will you send me away?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "Would you want to stay?" Her fingers traced a foggy swirl on the glass. "Only if I can bring the light with me." He blinked. "What light?" She pointed to the hallway. "The one that keeps the dark small." His heart clenched. That light, barely a bulb in a corridor, meant the world to her. And suddenly he realized, all his fortune couldn't replace what one night of safety offered her. He stood beside her, the skyline stretching out like opportunity. "Then the light stays on," he said. She smiled. And somewhere in that simple promise, a father was born. The boardroom was colder than usual, even under the morning sun. He entered, no assistant, no announcement. Just a man and a child's drawing tucked in his pocket. The partners stared, expecting damage control, excuses, a PR spin. Instead, he looked them in the eye and said, "I won't be attending the Shanghai summit. I have something more important to do." Silence. Then shock. "You're walking away from a 300 DM acquisition?" someone asked. He nodded. For now. The room erupted, but he remained calm. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to win. Not here. Not like this. His legacy was no longer numbers and press releases. It had a name. A heartbeat. A voice that asked for the light to stay on. He walked out as they shouted behind him. He didn't turn back. She painted while he read contracts. She sang to herself while he cancelled flights. In the stillness of their shared mornings, something fragile began to grow. But growth meant sacrifice. He missed the Tokyo deal call. Skipped a panel he once dreamed of. "You're distracted," his coup accused. "You've changed." He smiled faintly. "Good." He didn't say how hearing her hum down the hall was worth more than applause in a ballroom. But he felt it every time she ran into his arms after a nightmare. He began to see how every brick of his empire had been stacked over a hollow place. Now something real filled it. And it was terrifying. Not everything adjusted so easily. She broke a vase his assistant said was worth more than her school. She spilled juice on the antique rug. Once she screamed during a live Zoom pitch. The investors blinked. He excused himself. Held her, returned and closed the deal anyway. But behind doors, pressure mounted. Whispers in elevators. Headlines asking, "Is the CEO losing focus?" He tried not to care. He really did. But at night, while she slept, he stared at quarterly reports and felt the weight. He was learning that rebuilding a life meant breaking the old one first. And not everyone cheered for collapse. They danced in the kitchen to an old vinyl record. Pancake batter clung to the ceiling. Her laughter rang like a bell, pure, bright, and unfiltered. He burned the toast but didn't care. "You're terrible at this," she giggled. "Good," he grinned. "I'm learning." The skyline watched them like a silent witness. His hands, once built for contracts and coldness, now flipped pancakes and braided tiny strands of wet hair. Every second was joy stitched with fear. Because beneath it all he knew, the world would come calling. The board. The lawsuits. The headlines. But for now, in this sunlit kitchen, they were just two souls discovering a rhythm neither had ever known. Late one evening, she fell asleep beside him on the couch, mid-sentence, in a story about a purple unicorn with a law degree. He looked at her face, peaceful and trusting, and something inside him whispered, "What if you ruin this too?" That voice had been his companion for decades, driving him, warning him, haunting him. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Not this time." He carried her to bed, tucked her in, left the hallway light on. Then he opened his laptop, not for work, but for a search. Best schools near me. Parenting classes. How to be a father when you've never had one. He wasn't looking to fix everything. He just wanted to begin. A letter arrived by courier, sealed in the faded handwriting he hadn't seen in years. No return address. He opened it slowly, hands trembling. The first line hit like a hammer, "She's not yours, by blood." His heart stopped. The letter told a story never shared. His college love had left not just because he was cold, but because she was pregnant from a different man. A man who disappeared before the truth could be told. But she had chosen the CEO to be the child's father. You may not be her origin, but you are her beginning. The letter read. He dropped the paper. The walls seemed to lean inward. He had built an identity on the illusion of lineage. Now the girl upstairs, the one who called him home, wasn't his by blood. But somehow she was his more than anyone had ever been. He sat at her bedside, watching her sleep. The letter burned in his pocket. Every breath she took echoed like a countdown. "You're not mine," he whispered, testing the words in the dark. But the moment they left his lips, they disintegrated. No, she was his. Not through genetics, but through choice. Through every hallway light left on, every bedtime story, every tear wiped and pancake flipped. But fear gripped him. What if she found out? What if she chose to leave? He pressed his forehead to her tiny hand and murmured, "I choose you anyway." A single tear rolled down his cheek, vanishing into the folds of her blanket. The collapse wasn't just emotional, it was public. A leaked memo. The Shanghai deal had fallen apart without his leadership. Stocks dipped. Analysts questioned his stability. From visionary to vulnerable, screamed one headline. The board called for an emergency vote. Whispers of replacing him circulated like wildfire. In the elevator mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. Gone was the indestructible icon. What remained was someone worn, but real. As the doors opened to the boardroom, he didn't bring numbers or spin. He brought honesty. And a folder full of resignation papers, just in case the truth wasn't welcome. He was ready to lose the empire to protect the one thing that wasn't built on illusion. She heard the shouting through the phone. Voices she didn't recognize. Words like liability, emotional instability, shareholder, panic. Then she heard his voice, calm, firm, resolute. I am still your CEO, but I'm also a father now. One I chose to become. Silence followed. The line went dead. She sat cross-legged in his office, locket in hand, eyes wide. When he returned, she looked up and asked, "Am I the reason they're mad?" He knelt down, gently touched her cheek and said, "They're mad because I remembered what matters." She smiled faintly and whispered, "Then don't forget again." And he promised. Out loud. This time for everyone to hear. Late that night, the building was empty. He stood at the edge of the rooftop, wind pulling at his coat. Behind him, the skyline blinked like a machine he once commanded. Below, the city thrummed with indifference. He took out his phone and deleted every saved press release, every award photo, every headline. One by one. He wasn't erasing his past, he was surrendering to what was real. The rooftop door creaked open. She padded out in her socks, holding a mug of cocoa in both hands. "It's cold," she said. He turned. She handed him the mug. "Don't be alone." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Together, they stared into the night. Nothing was certain anymore. But it was honest. And that was enough. The boardroom was packed. A final vote. Reinstatement or removal. He entered, not as the man they once feared, but as someone they no longer recognized. "This company was built on precision and profit," he said, voice steady. "But that made it hollow. I forgot people. I forgot purpose." Murmurs spread like static. "And now?" a director asked. He placed a photo on the table, the girl asleep, clutching the locket. "Now I remember." They called for votes. One by one, hands raised. Not all in his favor. When the final count came, it was dead even. He looked to the chairman. "Break the tie," someone urged. But he raised his hand instead. "I'll make it easy," he said, pulling a resignation letter from his jacket. "I choose her." They tried to stop him. Calls from PR, urgent texts from investors, security chasing him down the marble corridor. But he kept walking. Past portraits of founders. Past displays of legacy. He didn't look back. Outside the world waited, journalists, flashing bulbs, protesters with placards, both praising and damning. She stood at the edge of it all, in a yellow raincoat, holding a drawing of their rooftop. When he saw her, he stopped. Everything else melted. She ran to him, and he knelt, catching her mid-air. "Did you win?" she asked. He smiled, teary-eyed. "I didn't lose." Behind them the tower still stood, but for the first time it no longer owned him. They spent the day walking with no destination. Ice cream on park benches. Feeding ducks. She told stories, impossibly wild ones, about dragons in elevators and invisible friends in suits. He listened, laughing without caution for the first time in years. When she skipped ahead, he watched like she was sunlight made flesh. No schedule. No obligation. Just presence. A man once driven by 5-minute blocks, now surrendered to timelessness. At one point, she stopped and turned. "Are you happy?" He paused. The word felt foreign, soft in his mouth. "I think I am," he said, unsure. She nodded. Then, you're doing it right. Evening found them in a quiet bookstore. She wandered the children's aisle while he browsed titles on parenthood. An old clerk, curious, asked, "First time?" He nodded. "Feels like I've been late to everything." The clerk smiled. "Better late than never, especially for this." She returned, arms full of books, and handed him one titled, "How to Be a Hero, Even If You're Not Perfect." He opened it. Inside she had scribbled, "This one's about you." His throat tightened. He bought every book she touched. They walked out carrying stories, and one of them was theirs, still being written. That night, she climbed into bed without asking. He tucked her in and sat beside her until her breath softened. Then, for the first time in his life, he wrote, not a pitch, not a speech, but a letter. To her, saying about everything. The fear, the failure, the love he didn't know how to give until now. He left it beside her pillow. Outside, fireworks bloomed over the skyline, a celebration he didn't attend. But from the window, he watched them light her room in bursts of red and gold. She stirred, eyes blinking open. "Are those for us?" she asked. He pulled her close. "Yes," he said. For the story we're starting. Weeks passed. The headlines changed, and the world moved on, chasing fresher scandals and shinier names. But in a quiet corner of the city, a man and a girl carved a new life. Mornings began with scrambled eggs and shared laughter. He applied for volunteer work, started attending therapy, began learning how to be, not just a father, but a man who could stay. One morning, as she tied her shoes, she looked up and said, "You don't wear suits anymore." He smiled. "I don't need armor now." She tilted her head. "Was it heavy?" He nodded. "Very. Be meant to." She grinned. "Good thing you took it off." And just like that, his chest felt lighter. The world outside could spin as it pleased. Inside their small orbit, peace had arrived, quiet, honest, and earned. He visited his old office one last time. The walls, once symbols of power, now felt like mausoleums. His name had been removed from the glass door. Inside, his former assistant packed boxes in silence. "Didn't expect to see you," she said softly. He nodded. "I left a few things here." At the back of the drawer, he found the watch he received after the IPO. Beneath it, her drawing. The one she gave him that day, of the rooftop and stars. He took both. "You starting something new?" she asked. "No," he replied. "I'm continuing something real." On his way out, he paused at the elevator. No regret. No guilt. Just a quiet goodbye to the man he no longer needed to be. They planted a tree together in the backyard of a rented townhouse. It wasn't grand or symbolic, just something living. She chose the spot. He dug the hole. "Why a cherry tree?" he asked. "Because they bloom even after winter," she answered. The soil stuck under their fingernails. Her giggles mixed with bird song. He watched her press dirt with tiny palms, and in that moment the past didn't matter. Bloodlines. Legacies. None of it. What mattered was roots, real ones, growing from shared soil. "Will it grow tall?" she asked. "Only if we take care of it," he replied. "Like us," she smiled. He nodded. And just like that, they both became gardeners of something bigger than either had imagined. Her first school recital came quicker than he expected. Rows of folding chairs, bright lights, willow whites, children fumbling lines and waving to parents. He arrived early, clutching a bouquet he almost forgot to buy. When she walked on stage and saw him, her whole face lit up. She said her lines, sang off key, and beamed with pride. Afterward, she ran straight into his arms. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "You were perfect," he whispered. Reporters weren't there. No cameras. No social posts. But it was the most important stage he'd ever stood before. She tucked her head into his neck and said, "I saw you the whole time." And he realized, being seen by her meant more than being seen by the world. That night, he tucked her into bed as usual. But before turning to leave, she said, "Tell me the story again." "Which one?" he asked. "The one where you were lost. And I found you." He sat on the edge of the bed and began, not from memory, but from the truth. There was once a man who had everything, but didn't know what anything meant, until a girl knocked on his door and reminded him how to feel. Her eyes drooped as his words slowed. "What happened next?" she murmured. He kissed her forehead. "They lived," he said. "Not perfectly, but honestly. And together." She was asleep before he reached the door. The hallway light stayed on. Years later, the headlines returned, but not for scandal. A new foundation launched under his name, dedicated to sheltering abandoned children. But the press barely mattered. What did was the girl, now taller, sharper, a force all her own, standing beside him as he cut the ribbon. "You nervous?" she teased. He laughed. "Terrified." "Good," she said. "That means it's real." The cameras flashed. For once, he didn't hide. This wasn't an apology tour. It was a beginning. She reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. In that moment, the world didn't see a former CEO or a former orphan. It saw a father and daughter who chose each other, and chose to build something no empire ever could. A place where no child had to knock on a stranger's door in the rain. The world kept asking questions he no longer needed to answer. "Would you return to business? Do you regret stepping down? What about your empire?" He answered only once. "I didn't step down. I stepped forward." He walked away from interviews with the same calm he once reserved for mergers. At home, the air smelled of cinnamon and library books. Her laughter came from the kitchen. He didn't need applause anymore. Every ordinary moment was louder than a standing ovation. As he poured 2 mugs of tea, he paused to take in the sound. Footsteps, clatter, joy. This was legacy. Not the buildings. Not the boardrooms. Just her voice, echoing softly through the house they made from nothing but love. She found the old letter one day, creased, yellowing, forgotten in a drawer. The one that told him the truth. She read it silently, her face unreadable. Then she entered the living room, letter in hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He looked up from his chair. "No panic. Just readiness. Because I didn't want biology to change what we built." She studied him. "It doesn't," she said. "But you should trusted me to know." He nodded. "I'm sorry." She walked to him, handed the letter back and sat beside him. "You weren't my first father, but you were the first one who stayed." And that was all either of them needed to say. Graduation came with thunderclouds but no rain. She stepped across the stage in boots, cap tilted sideways. He sat in the front row, clapping louder than anyone. When she received her diploma, she didn't wave. She pointed. Right at him. To the man who showed up, she'd written in her program dedication. After the ceremony, reporters circled her. "What's next?" one asked. She looked at her father across the crowd. "I don't know," she said. "But wherever it is, I'll leave the light on." He smiled. The world would know her name soon. But to him, she'd always be the girl who knocked on his door and showed him how to be human again. One final night. Stars overhead, city lights in the distance. She sat beside him on the rooftop where it all changed. Now, older, bolder, still his. "Do you remember that night?" she asked. "Every breath," he replied. Silence wrapped them. She reached into her pocket and handed him a new locket, one she made. Inside, a photo of the two of them on the rooftop, arms wrapped around each other, smiling under fireworks. Beneath it, engraved, "He left the company, but never left her." He swallowed hard. "You did save me," he said. "No," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other." And above them, the stars blinked in quiet agreement.